we can do this in a lot of different ways. Obviously, not are all as violent or extreme as worshiping Asherah or Moloch or something like that. But the point is, all the time, we're willing to make concession and sacrifice to something that is not of Christ in order to find something that only Christ can give us. We just don't embrace it that way. I'm willing to, in some respect, in the relational sense that this often gets attached to, I'm willing to sacrifice my desire to have a godly spouse in order just to have a spouse. That happens a lot. And I'm not trying to assault anybody with that. But a lot of times we're willing to make those sacrifices in order to have something that we think will satisfy us. Only in the end to realize we've been robbed. We robbed ourselves. But he makes so this idea, he says, what harmony is there between Christ and Belial? And the reality is you can't. Christ and Belial can't sing together. Belial demands sacrifice. Belial demands your all in order to give you something that you think you need. Whereas Christ sacrificed everything to give you what you need. They can't be at the same place. They can't go the same way. And so he's just making another illustration. You cannot have these two dynamics in your church. And then by extension, you can't have the two dynamics in your life. You can, but it's going to be destructive. People are going to get hurt. He goes on from there and he says, or what does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? Now, I know we've already covered the word common, but this is actually a different Greek word. The first one was sharing. This one means more portion. It's the word meris. And so he says, what portion, or what is it that someone who is believing and trusting and walking with Jesus, what can they possibly have in common with someone who does not? And again, if you go to work, right, it doesn't matter if you are, whatever, I don't know, fill in the blank of jobs. You could be working at a barbecue place together with an unbeliever, right? And you're going to have a common goal, and it's to make good barbecue and to make money. And that is what it is. But when you're talking about the spiritual ideas or being yoked together for God's kingdom and for spiritual goals, you have no portion. They don't share the same goals, right? As unbelievers, we're told in Romans chapter 1 and 2, as unbelievers, we seek one thing, and it's our own satisfaction and our own fulfillment. That's what we seek, right? And we might seek it by joining the Peace Corps because it makes us feel good to do good things. You ever thought about how twisted that is? I'm going to go serve other people because it makes me feel good. Well, that's wild. What if we just served other people because it was the right thing to do? That's what Christ did. But my point is that as an unbeliever, you're never going to share a portion with a believer. You might have temporarily aligned ideas to complete worldly tasks, and that's why we can work with unbelievers all day long. But for example, if you get a little bit more intimate and you decide, I'm going to start a business, and I'm going to bring this unbeliever on in a business. I'm not saying it's a sin. The Bible never says thou shalt not enter into business with an unbeliever. It never says that. But the reality is that if you're walking with Jesus, we're going to have different goals typically than an unbeliever. And at some point, you will have a difficulty in philosophy because your heart is not for money. Your heart is not to get all you can out of this business. Your heart is to be a blessing to Christ's kingdom. Whereas an unbeliever could care less about Christ's kingdom. They might want to feed hungry people or something like that. But in the end, that's not Christ's kingdom, is it? Christ's kingdom is people knowing Christ and receiving him as Savior. And that can just never be a priority or a place where two circles, meet each other and have a portion. It just can never be. And it can't be in a church. So we don't want to bring those things in. He says what agreement is there between the temple of God and with idols? There again, the word agreement, it's the idea of union, to be able to literally to place two things together. So he says, what Christ's temple versus the temple of idols? How can there ever be a place where two things can be together in there? And they can't, right? Because serving an idol is for a different purpose, and it's selfish. Whereas serving Christ is laying down our life because he loves us. And we want to be part of what he's called us to, and he's working through us in the power of his Spirit. It's two completely different dynamics. You can't have both of those dynamics in a church. Either you're going to use idolatry, blame, and shame, and if you serve Jesus, you'll feel better about yourself, or you serve Jesus and he'll just give you all the money and you'll never get sick, or whatever thing you want to mix in there. It can't coexist with the fact that God is just good to us. You can't mix the two. There's no portion between the two.